Welcome back. Joining us back in the studio this week, we're delighted to have Mr. Dan Nataf from the Anne Arundel Community College. He's the director from the Center for the Study of Local Issues. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Like it was just yesterday you were here.
It almost seems that way, yeah.
We always follow up, Kristen.
We do follow up. And it was so exciting the last time you were here. We were gearing up for this big poll. And let's start off with that, the poll that we were discussing last time you were here. When did the poll occur and what was your turnout like?
Well, we were in the field from March 25th to the 30th. We have a dual process. We go on the phones Monday through Thursday, and then we went online. We have a web panel. We have them do the survey online, and that started on Saturday. So from Saturday to Thursday, that was the period of data collection. We obtained 521 completed surveys using that method.
Okay, now what was more, the telephone or the web?
Telephone was way more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what day is the best day for people to answer the phone? Was it Saturday?
No, we didn't try Saturday. We were only online on Saturday. I think Tuesday was the best day.
Huh.
Monday was abysmal. I don't know what happens on Mondays.
Nobody's got it together on Monday. They're not ready to do a survey.
I don't want to talk to anyone on Monday.
Too many deep thoughts and
Too much
go
stuff
away.
going on Monday. Well, let's dive right into the results. What's the question that stood out the most to you?
Well, we had a lot of interesting results. I think that a lot of people are following the opioid situation, and our poll sort of tracked that. We asked about what's the most important problem facing residents of Anne Arundel County, and drugs came up at 24%. 24% is a really large number. Most things don't get beyond 10, 15% unless there's a big crisis. When the economy was at its worst, it was 48%, but now it's down to 5 or 6%. So, of course, when something big goes down, something else has to go up. And so, relatively speaking, this focus on drugs now is a lot more serious than it was in the past.
And that was presented as an open-ended question, not something was set.
That's right.
So that is a pretty big number.
Yeah. I mean, the students are coding the answers, but we train them and we explain the kinds of answers they might anticipate. Plus, they have closed-ended choices, so they can check off drugs. So it's not like they have to write it all out, because we've done this so many times. We know their categories of responses, and it's easier to code that way.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And so that was one thing that came up. That was probably the glaring thing. The economy, taxes, those things used to be much higher than they are. I think there's in some degree, it's sort of some political changes that occurred, lessened the intensity of those issues. The economy got better. But on taxes in particular, I think having a Republican county exec and a Republican governor probably dampens the saliency of those as issues, and so naturally something else goes up, and it could be education, it could be transportation, a lot of other things, but in this case it was drugs. Drugs and crime together were at 34%, so that's a third of every respondent says something bad about drugs and crime. That's really a quality of life hit. And so, the government, I suppose, is trying to figure out how to respond to this without breaking the budget and just trying to do too many things all at once. So it's a challenge, but clearly, if you're trying to respond to kind of the latest trend, you need to be on that, catching that wave and dealing with it.
Yeah.
The one that interested me the most, as far as it being surprising, were the numbers, the responses you got on the immigration issue. You had two questions. One was about immigration, one was about a Muslim ban, quote unquote, and it was almost 50-50, right? I mean, it was pretty evenly divided, like we're hearing the nation is. And just to kind of give my 2 cents on Anne Arundel County, the political leanings of Anne Arundel County, for a very long time, it was considered a strongly Republican conservative county. And I feel like there's a little bit of a shift going on. And I'm not sure if it's really going the other way or it's going back and forth. But, we talked off camera about, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in Anne Arundel County. That was surprising to me. Like, I didn't expect that. And then you see these kind of divided results on immigration. So, I mean, I'm not sure what to make of that.
I think that the last election presented a kind of accentuated framework that wasn't traditional kind of conservative liberal, and to some extent this populistic nationalist element that Trump interjected heightened the saliency of immigration as an issue, and that was part of the travel ban question when he got in. He starts with that right away. I think he feels that he's gotten a mandate to do immigration and to do something about internal terrorism and a kind of law and order mindset. And so as a result, I think that he's focused on those issues. Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated voters are somewhat with him, particularly on the deportation of legal immigrants. We asked that. It was 51% supported that. It wasn't a huge mandate, but it was the one issue that got the most support. Every other issue got less support. The travel ban was lower, and a whole host of other things, domestic and foreign, were lower. So, it's not a resounding sense in which, wow, that's the next thing. We should pull out all the stops and find and deport every illegal immigrant, because it sharply polarizes on political and ideological ground, very, very sharply. And so, if you want to just put all your cards in one side, you could do that. Mm-hmm. But it's going to not endear you at all to the other side. So how you do it, how zealous you are, how confrontational you are, I think the methodology and the pace is important in that regard, not losing legitimacy broadly. You can bunker down into your core base and just say, that's all I care about. But I'm not sure that that's really what governing is all about.
I think you're right that I'm just going to say Trump, or that election, everything went out the window. I mean, none of the conventional wisdom that we think about elections came true in that election. Everything changed, just down to a tweet comes out and, he said something that's not factually accurate or not completely true, and you can't do that, and then he would do it again. And
sure, he makes
so much strange.
Reagan's Teflon look like a brittle paste.
We can't even say Teflon anymore. It doesn't work.
Beyond
really.
Teflon.
It's something more malleable. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, trying to understand the consequences of his election in Anne Arundel County, how much support there is for the kind of agenda that he has and so forth. Look, he's at 35% approval. And so there isn't strong support. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, and he's kind of down again to that limited base. I think that he's in juxtaposition to the governor, who's flying high. And again, we talked a little off camera about mm-hmm. that. But there are a lot of ways you can govern and try to bring people together. Mm-hmm. And there are other ways where you're kind of dividing people and using the kind of anxiety of fear to a large extent, and not particularly compelling positive vision, except to those who really, really believe it. They are they're zealous believers, but it drops off pretty fast when you get beyond that group. And so very different governing models between the governor and the president. And that's what we saw in our poll.
I think your poll had a lot of good discussion points where, we mentioned that you mentioned that drugs was the top issue, and I don't know if I would have predicted that, but then when I think about why, it's a little bit of both, right? It's, maybe we're doing a good job of highlighting the issue and letting people know that it's a problem.
Right.
Or maybe it's because now almost anyone who's watching this show or sitting at home has a family member or friend that they lost to addiction. It's probably a little bit of both, right?
We did a poll, I think a year and a half back, asking the question, do you know somebody who has, a friend or family member who has a dependency on a prescription pain killer or on heroin, right? Either way. And we found 25% who thought of someone with kind of a more than passing interaction with each of those. So if you're thinking that a quarter,
is that high? You think that's high?
I think that's pretty high. Yeah, I don't know anyone like that. I don't know if you all do, but
I was talking to my neighbor yesterday. She knows 6 people who have died since friends from high school, different high schools in the county. 6 people she knows.
That's
who
incredible.
Died.
Yeah. So and it's a dramatic thing. It's a personal trauma when it occurs, and so it's if you have a friend or family member who's in that situation, who's overdosed and maybe got saved by Narcan or something, it just heightens it to it's a crisis, and we need to deal with this because it's a drama. Not everything has that kind of immediacy, you know. It's climate change or something. You can kind of say, well, there's a foggy kind of time frame for that, and maybe it's a crisis or will be or something. But when people are, your neighbors and your friends are showing signs of addiction and are unstable, they're psychologically traumatized or unbalanced, can't hold a job, they're coming, you know, they're in a stupor, it's right there in front of you. You can't avoid it. And so I think that's, to the extent that it's becoming more common, I think it's hard to bypass it as an issue. So, you know, some other issues I'm sure will be around in a year or 2 or 3 if this abates and we get our arms around it as a problem. But if it isn't, it could hold on for some steady period of time and just be there each time as the most important problem.
Another issue that was on the poll that I found this really interesting.
Okay.
70% of the respondents were for school redistricting. Can we touch on that?
Well,
And will they change their mind when they actually have to go to a hearing and talk about redistricting?
Well, I mean, the school, because we pitched it as an efficiency measure, you know, there are a lot of people who say, well, government, schools should be efficient. They shouldn't let vacant seats go wanting. Why would you do that? We certainly don't want anyone to raise our taxes, so that would be the worst of all worlds. So let's try to be efficient. And it didn't really polarize along political lines. I think that as long as it's not your kids being redistricted and to a school system that you consider worse than the one that you had,
which always happens with redistricting.
Well, that's it. I mean, you know, if you're in Severna Park and someone's telling you you're going to Old Mill, suddenly that generalized statement about efficiencies in school districts might not look so good.
Old Mill's an excellent school.
Nothing against Old Mill.
Better watch out, those Patriots that come after you.
School, so,
yeah, that's true. They did just get a new school.
Yeah.
Old Mill's coming up after Crofton.
Well, I mean, having been part of the Greater Severna Park Council for 30 years, I've heard a lot of people say admiring things about the Severna Park feeder system.
Sure.
And, you know, people try to get in it. They rarely try to get out of it, right? And so, again, if you were on the kind of the regional margins and, you know, you got moved a little bit here and there, I think because people sit there saying to themselves, I am buying a house in this school district. And they're going to pay a premium, make it a smaller house at higher cost, because they are ensuring their kids access to a school feeder system, right, that they think is good. And so people, I think, when they're put in that situation, they'll fight very hard to not have their kids transferred out of the desirable one into what they perceive as a less desirable one.
Interesting. It's just also interesting. Well, congrats on completing the poll. Thank you for your hard work.
How do we read your poll?
Yeah.
Well, you can go online and to my www.2.aacc.edu/CSLI, and it's on the website. It's right in the middle. There's a flashing icon saying new. Just click on it, and that'll get you the whole press release, 50 or 60 pages of glorious reading.
Great. Oh, I definitely plan on checking it out.
Kristen's going to read every word.
We hope that you will too, and we thank you for coming back, Dan. Please come back right before the next one.
I will do that.
Gear up for that second one.
Yeah, I'll try to urge people to participate.
And yes, please participate the next time that there's a poll coming around. Dan, thank you so much for being back in the studio. And we'll be right back with more Week in Review right after this.